I am calling the police right now if you do not leave my property!
My sister thought I was her permanent, on-call, unpaid servant, so I finally locked my door. She responded by telling my parents I was unstable and a danger to her children. An hour later, I was forced to play security footage for a police officer, and I set a trap she never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The migraine had started an hour ago, a familiar, dull throb behind my left eye that signaled an impending explosion of pain. I'd taken my medication, but I knew I was on borrowed time. I stared at the audio file on my computer, the cursor blinking mockingly. Stats Surgical Report, Dr. Al-Jamal, the file was named. Urgent. A complex triple bypass procedure, and the surgeon, a notoriously fast talker, had dictated over 40 minutes of post-operative notes that I needed to transcribe, proof, and return within the next 2 hours. My biggest client, a surgical group that paid half my monthly bills, depended on me for this kind of turnaround. At 42, I had built a precarious freelance career as a medical transcriptionist, a job that required absolute silence and intense focus, all from the small home office I'd fought so hard to maintain. My focus was shattered by the crunch of gravel in my driveway. I didn't even need to look up. It was the sound of my life being derailed, the sound of my younger sister, Laura. I glanced at the clock. 10:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. I saw her beat-up sedan through the blinds, the one I'd co-signed for. I saw her get out, her movements rushed and agitated. She went to the back door, and I saw the small heads of my nephew and niece, Liam, 9, and Sophie, 6. My heart did its usual complicated squeeze, a rush of love for them, and a hot, sinking dread of their mother. A familiar script was about to play. Laura would text, "I'm here," and then immediately walk in, uninvited, dropping the kids' backpacks on my clean floor. She would give me a breathless, false-sounding excuse. "My agent just called," or "I have a huge influencer collab, gotta run." And then she would be gone, leaving me to juggle two energetic, and often unruly, children with a stat surgical report that could not, under any circumstances, be late. But today was different. Today, the migraine was a vice. Today, the deadline was ironclad. Today, I had finally had enough. As I heard her familiar, confident footsteps on the porch, I didn't go to the door. Instead, I pressed the lock icon on my phone, which controlled my smart lock. I heard the thunk of the deadbolt. A moment later, my doorbell camera chimed on my phone, and Laura's face appeared on the screen, looking annoyed. "Thea, open up, it's freezing." I leaned toward the intercom speaker on my desk. My voice came out calmer than I felt. "Hi, Laura, I can't today." She froze, her perfectly microbladed eyebrows shooting up. What are you talking about? Open the door." "I can't," I repeated, my voice firm, though my stomach was churning. "I have a critical work deadline, the one I told you about last night. I can't watch the kids, you have to leave." For a second, she just stared at the camera, her expression blank with disbelief. The entitlement was so complete that the concept of no simply didn't compute. Then, her face contorted. It was like watching a mask crack and fall away. "Are you kidding me?" she shrieked, her voice high and sharp. She stepped forward and slammed her fist on the door. "Thea, don't be like this. I don't have time for your moods. Open this door right now." "I'm not having a mood, Laura. I'm working. I am on a deadline that pays my mortgage. You can't just drop them here. I told you that." "It's an emergency," she screamed. Liam and Sophie were now out of the car, standing on the walkway, looking small and confused. My heart ached for them. "What's the emergency, Laura?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She sputtered, My meeting, it's with a huge brand. This could be my big break, Thea, and you're trying to ruin it. You're so selfish. You just sit in there all day doing nothing." "I'm not doing nothing, I'm working," I said, my patience snapping. "And you know I am. You do this every time. You have to find someone else." "There is no one else," she wailed, and this time she delivered a full-force, open-palmed slap to my front door. The woods shuddered. "You're their aunt. It's your job. What is wrong with you? You're being heartless. You're going to make me lose this job." Sophie started to cry. I felt like the lowest form of life on earth, but I held my ground. If I caved now, I would cave forever. "Go home, Laura, or find other care. I am not opening the door." Her face went pale with a rage that was terrifying to see. She pointed a shaking finger at the camera. "You will regret th. She whispered, her voice venomous. "You have no idea what you just did." She grabbed a stunned Liam by the wrist, snatched up a crying Sophie, and stormed back to her car. She threw them into the back seat, not even buckling them in, I noted with a fresh wave of anger, slammed her door, and peeled out of my driveway, spinning gravel onto my lawn. I stood in my silent house, my heart hammering against my ribs. The migraine was no longer a throb, it was a full-blown explosion of white-hot pain. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I stood frozen in my office for a full 5 minutes after her car disappeared. My hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't grip my mouse. The silence of the house felt unnaturally loud, amplified by the phantom ringing of Laura's screams in my ears. The adrenaline from the confrontation had momentarily eclipsed the pain of my migraine, but now it all came flooding back, a toxic cocktail of guilt, rage, and physical agony. My first impulse was to run after her, to call her and apologize, to say, "Bring them back, it's fine, I'll manage." That was the role I had always played. I was Thea, the reliable one, the boring, stable, rigid older sister who existed to clean up the messes made by Laura, the spirited one. My entire family, especially our parents, Margaret and Robert, had reinforced this dynamic for over 30 years. Laura had passion, I had responsibilities. Laura had dreams, I had a job. But as I sank into my office chair, the sheer, blinding injustice of it all hardened my resolve. I remembered, with crystal clarity, what had happened just 3 weeks prior. Laura had pulled the same stunt, dropping the kids off with a breezy. "Just for an hour, Thea, I promise," while I was in the middle of a live, timed transcription test for a new, high-paying neurology clinic. That hour had turned into 6. Liam, bored, had started playing with my modem, and my internet connection had dropped in the middle of the test. I failed it. I lost the potential client, a contract that would have been worth thousands. When I confronted Laura, she had laughed it off. "Oh, Thea, don't be so dramatic, it's just money, I'll pay you back." She had never paid me a dime. She still owed me for co-signing her car, for the 3 months of her rent I'd covered last year, for the endless stream of just $50 she needed for gas or groceries. The guilt began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard anger. I wasn't just angry for myself, or my lost income, or the throbbing pain in my skull. I was angry for Liam and Sophie. What kind of mother used her children as emotional battering rams? What kind of person screamed and cursed in front of them, then peeled out of a driveway without even buckling them in? I looked at the small, discreet monitor on the corner of my desk. It showed 4 camera feeds from my home security system. I'd had it installed a year ago, not for burglars, but for Laura. It had felt extreme at the time, paranoid even. But I'd done it after she'd borrowed my expensive work laptop while I was in the shower, then dropped it, shattering the screen. She'd lied, of course, claimed it just stopped working, and our parents had taken her side. It was an old computer anyway, Thea. You can't blame Laura for an accident. The accident was the final straw. I'd used my savings to buy a new high-end system and a security package with cloud storage. I had a camera on the front door, one on the driveway, one on the back porch, and one in my living room. I'd told myself it was for peace of mind. But I knew, deep down, I was building an arsenal. I tapped a few keys, opening the cloud storage. There it was. Driveway camera 10:15 a.m., front door camera 10:16 a.m. I clicked on the files and the whole ugly scene played back. The audio was crystal clear. My calm, firm "I can't today." Her disbelieving what? Her escalating screams, her lies about a big break. Her venomous, whispered, "You will regret this." And finally, the driveway footage showing her driving off with the kids. I downloaded both files. I saved them to my desktop, then backed them up to a separate, encrypted hard drive. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The guilt was gone. Laura, in her blinding rage, always forgot one crucial thing: this house has eyes and ears, and I was no longer willing to be the silent witness to her destruction. I was now the curator of her consequences. I took a deep breath, swallowed 2 more painkillers, and turned back to the surgeon's audio file. I had work to do. My relationship with Laura was a 38-year-long case study in one-sided sacrifice. I was the elder by 4 years, and from the moment she was born, I was designated her keeper. I was the old soul, the responsible one. Laura was the wild child, the free spirit. Our parents, Margaret and Robert, reveled in this dynamic. They were retired now, living comfortably in a condo an hour away, but their entire parenting philosophy had been one of lazy typecasting. I was praised for good grades and predictable behavior. Laura was praised for breathing. When I'd buckled down in college, aiming for a stable career that would give me independence, Laura had drifted, changing her major 5 times before dropping out to find herself. This finding involved a string of bad jobs, worse boyfriends, and a constant, draining siphon on our parents' finances, and by extension, mine. I was the one who drove her to the hospital when she got appendicitis at 2 a.m. because her boyfriend at the time was too drunk. I was the one who scraped together the security deposit for her first apartment. And when she'd announced her pregnancy with Liam, the result of a short-lived relationship with a man who wisely vanished, I was the one who hosted her baby shower, bought her crib, and held her hand during the delivery. I'd done the same for Sophie, whose father was equally absent. I loved those children. I adored them. I kept their favorite snacks in my pantry, their drawings taped to my fridge. They were the only innocent parties in this endless, exhausting drama, but my love for them had become a weapon Laura used against me. Because I worked from home, she and my parents had collectively decided that my time was not valuable. "You're home anyway," was the constant refrain. "It's not like you have a real job, Thea. You just type." They conveniently ignored the fact that my typing paid my mortgage, my bills, and more often than not, Laura's bills, too. Laura, now 38, had no discernible job. She claimed to be a social media influencer, which in reality meant she had a few thousand followers on Instagram and spent her days taking selfies in cafes she couldn't afford while trying to get free products. She presented her life as a high-stress, glamorous hustle. I knew it was a carefully constructed lie, funded by our parents' retirement fund and my guilt. The antagonist in my life wasn't just Laura. It was the entire system my family had built. My parents were the architects of her dysfunction. Just last month, I'd tried to set a boundary. I'd called a family meeting, a conference call, really, and tried to explain calmly that I needed advance notice for babysitting. "Oh, Thea, don't be so rigid," my mother, Margaret, had sighed, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Laura is doing her best. It's so hard for a single mother." "I'm a single person," I'd countered, my voice tight. "I have a demanding job, my clients have emergencies, I can't just drop everything." "It's family, Thea," my father, Robert, had chimed in, using his final word tone. "Family helps each other. Your sister needs you. You're lucky you don't have kids of your own, you don't know what real stress is." The implication was clear. My stress, my work, my life was secondary to Laura's whims. My sacrifices weren't seen as sacrifices, they were seen as obligations. My home wasn't my sanctuary, it was Laura's free daycare. Laura herself was the most polished and manipulative of all. She could weep on command, spinning tales of woe about near-missed opportunities and cruel twists of fate. She spoke of her brand and her network with a straight face, as if she were a CEO and not someone who'd been evicted twice in 3 years. Her meetings were almost always lunches with friends. Her emergencies were hair appointments. She was a black hole of need, and I had been her primary source of fuel for my entire life. Today, I had finally cut the fuel line, and as I sat at my desk, the silence in the house felt less like a void and more like a shield. I knew the fight wasn't over. This was just the opening shot. But for the first time, I wasn't waiting to see what she would do next. I was waiting for them. The throbbing in my head had subsided to a dull ache, thanks to the medication and the sudden, sharp focus of my anger. I'd managed to finish the stat transcription for Dr. Al-Jamal, triple-checking it for any errors, and had emailed it to the surgical group with 10 minutes to spare. The relief was immediate, but it was short-lived. My victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the certainty that retaliation was coming. Laura was not the type to accept defeat. She was the type to escalate, to scorch the earth. My clever trap, as I'd come to think of it, was the security system. It was my only piece of leverage in a family dynamic that had been stacked against me from birth. I'd installed the system after the laptop incident, paying extra for the premium cloud storage plan that saved every file for 30 days, no matter what. I'd chosen cameras with high-definition video and, crucially, high-fidelity audio. I wanted a record. I didn't know what I was preparing for exactly, maybe just to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that the gaslighting I endured was real. Now, I knew. The system wasn't just for my peace of mind, it was my witness. I went into the kitchen to make a cup of tea, my hands still not perfectly steady. I was a passive victim by nature. My instinct was to smooth things over, to apologize even when I wasn't wrong, just to make the tension stop. But something in me had snapped this morning. It was the sight of Sophie's face, her little mouth trembling as her mother screamed. It was the casual, dangerous way Laura had sped off without buckling them in. This wasn't just about me and my job anymore. This was about them. My phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, buzzed. My stomach leaped. It was a text, not from Laura, but from my mother, Margaret. "Call me. Now, what did you do to your sister?" The capitals, the accusation, not what happened, or is everything okay, but what did you do? The verdict was already in. I was guilty. My thumb hovered over the call button. I could picture the conversation perfectly. My mother's voice, thick with disappointment and manufactured concern. "Thea, Laura is hysterical. She said you locked her out in the cold. She said you screamed at her in front of those poor children. She's at our house right now, crying her eyes out. How could you be so cruel?" And I would defend myself, my voice getting higher as I got more frustrated. "That's not what happened. She's lying. I was on a deadline." And my father would get on the line. "Thea, your sister is in a fragile state. You need to apologize. You need to make this right. You're tearing this family apart." I would be outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and steamrolled, just as I had been 1,000 times before. I would end the call feeling exhausted, defeated, and full of doubt. Not this time. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I was no longer a passive victim. I was an active strategist. I would not call them. I would not engage. They were not seeking the truth. They were seeking my submission. Instead, I went back to my computer. I opened my email and composed a new message to my personal, private email address. I attached the 2 video files, doorbell 10:16 a.m. MP4 and driveway 10:18 a.m. MP4. I hit send. Now the files were in 2 separate cloud systems, plus my external hard drive. They were safe. My phone buzzed again, and again. A string of texts from my mother, each more frantic than the last. "Thea, pick up the phone. This is not funny. Laura is a wreck. Your father is furious. Are you punishing her? Is that it? You are being incredibly childish." I watched the messages pop up, and for the first time I felt nothing. No guilt, no panic, just a cold, clear certainty. They were following a script, but I had the real one. I had the truth, recorded in high definition. I turned my phone over, silencing the screen. I would not participate in my own character assassination. I would wait. The burden of proof was no longer on me. It was on the video files saved on my hard drive. I made another cup of tea and waited for their next move. I knew it wouldn't be just a phone call. The quiet in my house lasted for exactly 45 minutes. It was just long enough for me to start second-guessing myself, to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing, if I really was the cold, selfish monster they all thought I was. The migraine was still a dull, pounding drum, and the silence seemed to magnify it. Then I heard a car door slam, not just one, but 2. I looked at my security monitor. It wasn't Laura's sedan. It was my father's dark blue SUV. My heart sank. They hadn't just called, they had driven an hour to confront me. My doorbell rang, not a polite ding-dong but a long, impatient ding as someone held the button down. Then came the pounding. Not the hysterical, flailing pounding of Laura, but the heavy, righteous fist of my father, Robert. "Thea, open this door, we know you're in there," he boomed. I walked to my office, my legs feeling like lead, and sat at my desk. I activated the intercom, just as I had with Laura. "What do you want?" My mother's face appeared in the camera, pale and pinched with anger. "Don't you what do you want us, Thea? This has gone far enough. Let us in. We need to talk about what you did to your sister." "I didn't do anything to her," I said, my voice shaking despite my resolve. "I am working. I told her I couldn't watch the kids. She's the one who had a tantrum." "She is distraught," my mother cried, her hands fluttering to her chest in a gesture of pure theater. "She came to us, in tears, saying you screamed at her and the children that you told her. You told her you wished she'd never had them. How could you?" The lie was so audacious, so vile, that it took my breath away. "I never said that. That is an absolute, disgusting lie, and you know it." "We know what we heard, Thea," my father's voice cut in, his face now looming in the camera. He looked furious. "You're cooped up in this house all the time, staring at that screen. You're not well. You're letting your work turn you into a cold, bitter person. Now you will open this door and you will call your sister and apologize for this nonsense." "No," I said. The word was small, but it felt solid. "I will not." "What did you say?" my father roared. I said no, I am not apologizing for a lie. And I'm not letting you in just so you can both bully me and take her side. You never, not once, have ever taken my side. "Side," my mother shrieked. "This isn't about sides, Thea. This is about family. Laura is struggling and you with your nice house and your quiet life. You can't even find it in your heart to help her for a few hours." "My nice house and quiet life were paid for by the work you're currently interrupting," I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. "The work she constantly disrespects. The work you disrespect. You don't want to talk. You want me to surrender, and I'm not doing it." I was about to cut the connection when I had an idea. It was time for the first reveal. "In fact," I said, my voice suddenly calm and clear, "I have a video of the entire conversation, from the moment she pulled up to the moment she drove away." They both froze. My mother's mouth opened and closed. My father's angry expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "What?" my mother whispered. "I have a security camera. It records audio and video. I have the entire thing saved. Her screaming, her lies about her meeting, me calmly telling her I had to work, her speeding away without buckling the kids in. I have all of it." I let the words hang in the air. "Would you like me to email it to you, Mother, or would you rather just keep believing the lie?" I had expected this to be a checkmate, a moment of, "Oh my goodness, we've been duped." But I had underestimated their commitment to the narrative. My father's face hardened again. "A camera? You taped your own sister. What in the world is wrong with you, Thea? What kind of sick, paranoid person does that? That's entrapment." "It's a security camera, Dad. It's on my front door. It's not a secret." "You're trying to blackmail her," my mother accused, her voice finding new strength. "You're holding this over her head. This is worse. This is so much worse than we thought. You're unstable." I stared at them, dumbfounded. I had presented them with indisputable proof of my innocence, and they had twisted it into evidence of my insanity. They didn't care about the truth. They only cared about protecting Laura, protecting the broken, toxic system they had built. "Get off my property," I said, my voice dead. "Thea, get off my property, or I will call the police for trespassing." I cut the intercom feed. I watched on the monitor as they stood there, stunned into silence. My father looked like he wanted to break the door down, but my mother put a hand on his arm. They argued for a moment, their faces contorted. Finally, they stormed back to their SUV and drove away. I sat at my desk, my entire body vibrating. They believed I was unstable. They believed I was the villain. I had shown my hand and it had backfired. And I knew, with a terrifying, sinking certainty, what was coming next. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence was menacing. My confrontation with my parents had been a disaster. I had played my trump card, the video, and they had not only called my bluff, they had twisted it into another reason to condemn me. By trying to prove I was sane, I had only confirmed their narrative that I was unstable. My migraine, which had momentarily retreated, came roaring back. I felt sick. Laura, my parents, they were a closed system. Any evidence that contradicted their worldview, that Laura was a victim and I was a cold-hearted workaholic, was rejected and spun into a new attack. I was no longer just selfish. I was paranoid, sick, and unstable. I paced my living room, my mind racing. What was their next move? They couldn't force me to apologize. They couldn't force me to let them in. What was left? Laura was desperate. She had been humiliated at my door. She had successfully whipped our parents into a frenzy, but their siege had failed. She had painted me as a cruel and heartless sister, and now, thanks to my own admission, a paranoid one who taped her own family. She was all in on this lie. She couldn't back down now. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "What you did was sick. You taped her. Mom and Dad told me everything. You need help, Thea." It was Laura, blocked number or not, I knew her text speak. She was testing the waters, trying to get a reaction, to pull me back into the fight. I deleted the message without responding. I went back to my office and sat down. I opened the video files again, watching them. The driveway footage. Driveway 10:18 a.m. MP4. I watched as Laura's car sped away, Liam and Sophie clearly visible in the back. They were safe. They were with their mother. She was reckless and irresponsible, but they were with her. This was a family dispute. A nasty, ugly, long-overdue family dispute. But the new words they had used, unstable, sick, not well, echoed in my head. They weren't just insults. They were weapons. And I had a horrible feeling I knew how Laura was about to use them. She was desperate to regain control. She needed to punish me, to prove to our parents and to herself that she was the victim and I was the aggressor. How could she do that, now that her allies had failed? The answer came to me in a cold, nauseating rush. She would escalate. She would take the lies she had told our parents and make them official. She would bring in an outside party, someone who couldn't be ignored. I looked at the clock. It was 11:45 a.m., just over an hour since I had locked my door. My thoughts were interrupted by a sound that made my blood run cold. A polite, official knock at my front door. It wasn't the frantic pounding of Laura or the heavy fist of my father. It was a measured, firm rap. I looked at my doorbell camera. My heart stopped. Standing on my porch was a police officer in a dark blue uniform. He knocked again. "Ma'am, this is the police. We're here for a wellness check. Could you please open the door?" This was it. This was her move. Laura, in a final, desperate, unforgivable act of malice, had called the police. She had taken our private, ugly family drama and turned it into a public spectacle, weaponizing the very people meant to protect us. She was building her case, not with truth, but with lies so monstrous she hoped they would be believed. She was claiming I was a danger. I saw her endgame now. She needed to prove I was unstable. And what better way than to have a police officer show up, lights flashing in my driveway, to investigate a wellness check on behalf of my worried family? She wasn't just trying to win an argument. She was trying to ruin me, and she had used her own children as bait. My fear, however, was immediately consumed by a white-hot, clarifying rage. This was not a confrontation. This was a war, and she had just handed me the ammunition to win it. I took one deep, steadying breath. I smoothed down my shirt, walked to the front door, and unlatched the deadbolt. I opened it. The officer was tall, with a weary, professional face. He looked to be in his late 40s. "Ma'am, are you Thea?" he asked, his hand resting near his belt. "Yes, officer, I'm Thea. How can I help you? I kept my voice perfectly level, polite, and calm. Ma'am, we received a call, a wellness check. From Laura and Margaret and Robert, your family. They expressed serious concern for your well-being. They said you were acting erratically, that you might be a danger to yourself. They also mentioned there were children here and that you weren't answering your phone. The lies were stacked so high, so quickly. A danger to myself. Children here. It was a lie designed to get him to my door fast. Officer, I said, I am perfectly fine. I am not a danger to myself. And as you can see, there are no children here. I am in the middle of my workday. The officer looked past me, into my quiet, tidy living room. They seemed very concerned, ma'am. They said you locked them out, that you were screaming and unstable. Would you mind if I just came in for a moment, just to verify that everything is all right? I would not mind at all. Please come in, I said, stepping aside. He stepped just inside the entryway, his eyes scanning the room. You live alone, Mal? I do. I work from home as a medical transcriptionist. It's a very demanding job that requires a lot of quiet. I see, he said, though he still looked skeptical. Your sister, Laura, she said she was here this morning with her children, and you, well, she said you snapped, that you refused to let her in and were screaming at her. This was the moment, the showdown, but it wasn't going to be the loud, dramatic mess Laura had envisioned. It was going to be quiet, calm, and systematic. Officer, I said, motioning toward my office, I am the one who is being harassed. My sister, my mother, and my father have all been here today, creating a disturbance. My sister filed a false report, and I have proof. He raised an eyebrow. Proof. Please come into my office. He followed me. I sat at my desk and brought up the security footage on my main monitor. I have a security system, officer. It records audio and video. This is my sister, Laura, arriving at 10:15 a.m. I clicked play on the doorbell 10:16 a.m. MP4 file. The officer stood behind me, watching silently. He saw Laura's face appear. He heard my calm, clear voice. Hi, Laura, I can't today. He heard her immediate, escalating shriek. Are you kidding me? Open this door right now. He heard my firm, patient explanation about my work. He heard her lie about her big break. He heard her call me selfish and heartless. He heard her venomous, you will regret this. I then clicked on the second file, driveway 10:18 a.m. MP4. And this, officer, is the driveway camera, time-stamped seconds later. This is my sister driving away with her children, who were, as you can see, safely in her car. They were never in my home. They were never in my care. And they were never in danger unless you count her reckless driving. The officer's face, which had been neutral and skeptical, had hardened into a mask of pure annoyance. He had been lied to. His time had been wasted. And just as he was about to speak, as if on cue, a car door slammed outside. Then another. I looked at my monitor. Laura's sedan, my father's SUV. All three of them, Laura, Margaret, and Robert, were rushing up my walkway, their faces a mask of righteous concern. They had clearly followed the police, timing their arrival to be the rescuing family. They saw the open door and burst in. Officer, thank God, my mother cried, rushing toward him. Is she all right? We were so worried. See, Laura yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's crazy. She locked us all out. She's unstable, I told you. The officer held up a hand. The effect was instantaneous. All three of them stopped, their dramatic entrance script cut short. Ma'am, he said, his voice hard, addressing Laura directly. I have just reviewed security footage of your encounter this morning. Laura's face went from pale to ghostly white. My parents looked confused. Footage, my father said. That's right, the officer continued, his eyes locked on Laura. I saw the entire event. I heard you screaming at your sister. I heard her calmly tell you she was working. I heard you lie about an emergency. And then I saw you drive away with your children. At no point were those children in danger. At no point was your sister unstable or screaming. You, however, were. He turned his gaze to my parents. And then you came and continued the harassment. and then you." He said, pointing back to Laura, "Called in a false report, claiming child endangerment and a person in a mental health crisis, tying up police resources." The triumphant, worried expressions had vanished, replaced with pure, unadulterated shock. My mother looked like she was going to faint. My father's face was beet red. Laura began to sputter. But she taped me. That's illegal. She's sick." "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice dangerously low. "Your sister has a security camera on her own front door. That is perfectly legal. What is not legal is filing a false police report. Wasting police resources is a very serious offense. It keeps me from responding to actual emergencies." He took a step toward them, and they instinctively recoiled. "I have everything I need. You will all leave this property immediately. You will not contact your sister again. If I get one more call to this address from any of you, I will not be as understanding. Do you understand me?" My mother just nodded, her eyes wide. My father stared at the floor. But Laura, even in total defeat, had one last shot. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was stunning. You did this," she whispered. "You tore this family apart." "No, Laura," I said, my voice clear and strong, echoing in the sudden silence. "You did, you lied, and I just told the truth. Get out of my house." The officer stayed until all three of them were back in their cars. He watched them drive away, my parents in their SUV, looking shell-shocked and small, and Laura peeling out in a cloud of gravel, just as she had before. When they were gone, the officer turned to me, his expression softening. "Ma'am, I am truly sorry for that. That was a lot." "Thank you, officer. I appreciate you handling it so well," I said, my knees suddenly weak. "You have a right to work, and you have a right to peace in your own home," he said. He handed me a small card with a case number on it. "For your records, if they contact you again, call us and reference this file. We'll take it very seriously. What your sister did, that's not just a family spat, that's a crime." I nodded, unable to speak. He gave me a polite nod and left. I closed the door, and this time I bolted the deadbolt. The silence that filled my house was profound. It was no longer menacing. It was a vast, open, beautiful quiet. It was the sound of peace. It was the sound of done. I went back to my office and sat at my desk. I felt empty, but not in a bad way. I was emptied of the dread, the guilt, the constant, low-level anxiety that had been my companion for decades. I was free. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. My family, as I knew it, was over. The toxic, codependent, gaslighting structure had been shattered, and the pieces were scattered. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that what was broken could not be, and should not be, put back together. I did one last thing. I opened my email. I composed a new message to my parents. The subject line was, "The truth." In the body, I simply wrote, "You wanted to know what happened. Here it is. You accused me of being unstable and cruel, and you believed a pathological liar over your own daughter. You enabled her behavior, and you participated in this harassment. This is what you enabled. This is what you defended." I attached the two video files. Doorbell 10:16 a.m. MP4 and driveway 10:18 a.m. MP4. I added one final line, "Do not contact me until you are ready to apologize. Not to me, but to the truth." I hit send. Then I went into my phone and I blocked Laura's number, my mother's number, and my father's number. The next few weeks were strange. The silence was absolute. No angry texts, no surprise visits, no drama. At first, it was jarring. I kept checking my phone, bracing for an attack that never came. Then I started to relax. I took on a new client, the neurology clinic I had failed the test for. They had another opening, and with my house finally, truly quiet, I passed their new test with a 100% accuracy rating. My income increased by 30%. I started sleeping through the night. The migraines that had plagued me for years began to fade, becoming less frequent and less severe. I had never realized how much of my physical illness was tied to the constant, grinding stress of my family. About a month later, I received a letter. It was handwritten from my mother. It was long, full of justifications, but you have to understand clauses. But buried in the third paragraph were the words I'd waited my whole life to hear. We watched the videos. We didn't know, we see now. We are so sorry, Thea, we failed you. I put the letter down. I didn't call her. It was a start, but it was not a resolution. Healing, if it ever came, would be on my terms and on my timeline. My life is quiet now. I work, I read, I take walks. I have my home, my sanctuary back. My network of friends, long neggle. CTED has rallied around me. Laura, I heard, had to get a real job. The bank of mom and dad and the free daycare of Thea was permanently closed. She is furious, but her anger has no power over me anymore. I have my peace, I have my proof, and I have my vindication. And as it turns out, that is worth so much more than a family's broken, toxic idea of love.